Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Enlightened Canvas. Um, this is a space where we're going to combine consciousness and creativity and have some fun while we're painting. Um, so each episode, I plan on introducing a new painting, a new way of looking at things and thinking. And hopefully that will inspire you to change maybe your current perception of reality and look at things from a new lens. So, whether you're an art enthusiast, a seeker of deep truth, aren't we all? Or you're just simply curious about this incredible combination of consciousness and curiosity, um, hopefully the Enlightened Canvas will give you a space where you can find, you know, a little beacon of light and some inspiration. It's kind of the goal. And the biggest goal is to hopefully give you some validation on your spiritual journey. Hashtag I'm not crazy. We're all thinking the same thing, or we're thinking something similar. And is this off the beaten path, or does it really resonate with me? And we're going to use art to explore that. Um, Hopefully, it'll provide a spark of awareness to another way of looking at things, and at the same time, show you how to do a lovely painting. And I have fun with that. Those are my two passions, painting and spirituality. So I will also post a video down below, and that will have a link to a step-by-step instructional video on completing the painting. So in our discussion today, we're just going to toss out some ideas and kind of pose some questions and, throw some ideas to consider it. But I'm not going to speak to every step in the painting. I'm going to just cover that later in a separate video. So hopefully, if you like the painting, you'll jump on that one and enjoy yourself. So I'm going to just show you real quickly what we're going to do today. I've already got it pre-sketched out, as you can see. I will also include a link to the stencil. You're welcome. Um, so my theory is, in the painting, I'm not going to teach you how to draw, but I will teach you how to paint it. And the stenciling, anytime I do a painting, I immediately do a trace stencil, and I use some clear cellophane. I'll set it over the painting. As you can see, this is from a different painting. And I'll quickly draw it that way. I don't lose the integrity. For our purposes today, we're working in acrylic, and I'm working on an 8x10 canvas. So you can have the supplies ready for whenever you jump over. And this is our finished guy. Isn't he cute? So I'm also going to do a couple different videos and different colors. So if you like him in blue or you like him in pink, and I will teach you how to look at any given painting and determine your values and be able to then change up the colors. So I generally go for 3 different base colors. So you have your middle tones, which are the base of the bunny. You've got your highlights and you've got your lowlights. So if you really stick within those 3 tones, you can accomplish translating anything pretty darn easy. So I will talk a little bit about my supplies, and then we'll kind of kick it off and get into our consciousness discussion. I am using 3 different filberts. So let's see if I got this in the camera right. And they're very fancy. I'm going to refer to them as big, medium, small, like not very technical. And then I've got some really, really tiny ones. So these are I'm using for the whiskers and some outlines and some details in the eyes. Very important, I have my dab rag, and I have a cup of water. So as you can see, mine is already a little shade of blue. I don't typically wash out my water when I'm jumping in between different colors or different paintings. If you take your paintbrush to the dab rag and you wash it off, and you're not going like from heavy blue right into white, you should be fine. And even if you dab it off enough, you should be fine. As for our colors today, I am using 2 dollops of white, and I always do 2 dollops. So anytime, 99% of my paintings, you're always going to have white in there. Even if you're not seeing white, you're using it as what I'll call paste. You're kind of mixing it in with the other colors to make them less opaque. I've got 2 dollops of my phthalo blue. I have a dollop of my dioxazine purple and just a touch of black. So the black, I did it right now to get going for our painting, but sometimes you may want to wait till you're ready for the black. Black is the one that dries the quickest. And so when you get to your black, you typically will have to add water just to get yourself going. So I'm going to start off with my medium filbert, dabbed it in the dab rag. And for our purposes of our painting, I'm going to start with the background and do that in my lightest shade of blue, like a baby blue. I'm going to go over everything in the body of the painting. It was a medium blue. And I'm going to reserve my darkest blue and a little bit of the purple for some highlights and lowlights. And to do that, I'm just setting it up on my easel so I can see better here. I'm going to start on my palette, very fancy palette, paper plate. So, and I'm going to go with my very lightest color. If you're going light, start with your white and creating a new little area. I'm going to add some blue to it and keep adding white till you get the right color. Now, when you go to the canvas, you'll know, and it's just a feeling, you know, do I want it lighter? Do I want it darker? Etc. Now for the next color, I'm going to add another pile, grabbing my blue, going in a little bit darker. Still feels a little dark, so I'm going to add some white. Now we're working on an 8x10 canvas, but if you have a larger canvas, make sure you mix up enough color to last the full outline, the full interior part of your canvas. So I'll go ahead and wash that off. And like I said, I'm just going to paint as we talk. And then, you know, we'll pose some questions and see what feels good. So since it's the kickoff of our YouTube channel, we're going to talk about, our goal here is to combine consciousness with creativity. So I'm going to ask the question, what if consciousness and creativity are the same thing? So I did a little Googling definitions, and Google came back and said consciousness is the, and I have my Google answers right here. I didn't memorize Google. So consciousness is the state of being aware of oneself at the same time of being aware of one's surroundings. So being in tune with the inside and the outside. It also involves both the awareness of our internal thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions, sensations, and the perception of the external world through our senses. So being in sync with what our head is saying. So not just falling into the trap of mindless thoughts, but being aware of why we're thinking that and that we're thinking. So that's what Mr. Google says. So then I also did a little Googling on the definition of creativity. So Mr. Google, we like Mr. Google, he came back with creativity is the ability to think about a task or problem in a new way. So if you are creating, you look at things from a unique perspective, a new lens. So everybody knows the feeling of being creative. You all of a sudden come up with a solution because you've flipped it on your head. You're creating with your imagination. And so you utilize your imagination when you create. And then when you are painting too, feel free to flip your canvas. So many people get stuck with painting everything looking straight onwards. And isn't that quite appropriate? That creativity and creation causes you to flip the way you look at things. Okay, I didn't build that in. That just occurred to me. So we're going to go A for creativity. So now imagination. So we went back to Dr. Google, Mr. Google. And so imagination is the act or power of forming a mental image of something not present in the senses. So you are imagining the image, so your mind really becomes the canvas and you are creating. So if we kind of go back and look at some of those key elements in the definition of those three things, consciousness, creativity, and imagination. Consciousness is being aware while you use your imagination to create an image in your mind. You are being thoughtful. Some people call this mindfulness. Um, so perhaps the question should be, do we create through consciousness? Now I'll ask you, how many of you have thought about a person and then they text you or they call you after you thought about them, and you're like, wow, that was a coincidence, that was kind of cool, or you think of something and it actually happens. And I have some neat examples of that. Funny, we were having our entryway painted by somebody who is far more agile and can reach the top of the hallway and around the windows. And I don't mind painting canvases. I paint walls, but ceilings, that's for a young person. Anyway, so we were going through the color selection process, and I went through a billion different swatches and examples, and I said, okay, this is it. That's the one I want. I picked that one. And he went ahead. He got the paint, and even he decided that was a really tough spot to paint. So this very nice guy went ahead and he subcontracted out what I'll call the monkey part of the job, where this guy was literally hanging from the walls and jumping from one. It was a really, really difficult spot to get to. And that day we were going to be gone, so he was starting that job, which is a new color, and so we weren't there as we were seeing it come into fruition. So when we got home, or before we left, my husband, he made the comment, and he says, have you ever had somebody just pick the wrong color and totally have to redo the job? And he says, yes, we've had that happen. It's not fun, and we do charge him for it. And I made the comment. I said, I'm an artist. I know what I'm doing. I'm fine. We're fine. I think y'all know the answer to that, or what's going to come next on that. I basically got home and it was the complete wrong color. And I was like, how did I do that? So, you could take a look at that scenario and flip it on its head and go, okay, was that coincidence? Absolutely. Could have been just sheer coincidence. Or did, you could take the approach of, were you psychic? Did you see into the future and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. I have that, sensitivity to see things. Or did you create that future with that thought? And what I'll do in this whole format is I'll present these thoughts, I'll present these questions. At the end of the day, you're going to have to answer them for yourself and choose an answer that resonates with you. I personally think he created that. I think he called that into existence. Or that's just my way of getting out of trouble because it cost us more money. I don't know. So, but, I'll give you another fun example. This was many, many years ago. I was engaged, and not to my current husband, a different one. Anyway, so I had signed up to go to one of those bridal shows, and they had I don't know if you've been to those. So they have all the different vendors there, and typically what they do is they will all pitch in and give away one main grand prize. So if you you enter, you win the grand prize, and it's typically a nice combination of all the vendors. So my fiance at the time said, "Oh, what are your plans for today?" And I said, "I'm going to the bridal show because I'm going to win the grand prize." I didn't say I want to win the grand prize. I said, "I'm going to win the grand prize." And I did. So is it coincidence? Everything has the potential to be what we call coincidence, but is coincidence just a convenient explanation or a easy way of explaining things away? Perhaps. Or was I psychic? Did I reach into the future and say, hey, this is going to happen? So I see this, I'm seeing that. Or did I create that experience through manifestation, which will be a whole other episode? I personally think, it's funny. I for many years, I would have thought it one way. And as of late, I have changed my direction. I do believe that I called that into existence. And we kind of check this up to, aspects of manifestation. Getting right in under his little chin. Now, again, I'll go into far more detail in the painting video, but for right now, I will give you, because there's some folks who have attempted this before, and you can kind of just watch along and gain some insight on painting. What I am doing is just creating my base coat, my base color. And you'll notice that my strokes went with the direction of the ears. When I brought my strokes down to the body, I kept them in the direction of the body, kind of concave, making it look like it's oval. And within the face, I'm going to keep this also directional with the contour of the face. So, for example, you've got your cheeks here, and these are rounded cheeks. So I've added a little bit more white on this side, and we're going to add a little bit more darkness on this side. So in any painting, there will always be some aspect of light. And you have to choose, where is your light coming from? So in this particular painting, I am choosing that my light is coming from the left side and my shadows are on the right side. Now, I did the outline in pencil, and feel free to go over the lines. Blue and white covers really, really good, but when it dries, you will still be able to see a faint, especially when it's just the first coat, you will still be able to see a faint presence in your outlines. And as well, I am also choosing to go with the direction of some of the lines here. Pencil will smear a little bit, so you do want to try and avoid that. And you can do that by keeping your strokes kind of with, or not going straight across. I wouldn't go, straight across. I would keep them with the direction of what you're drawing. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper under here, just a tad. All right. And then before this dries, I'm going to bring a little bit of white up into the bunny ears, just to give them some nice coverage, a little bit of streaking. I like the way that it looks. Again, I will have a separate video that's posted that will give you very detailed. I'll kind of walk through, touch this paint, move that paint, this much combination. But feel free to follow along at home if you feel comfortable. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of variation in the bottom. So not really painting in fur, but I'm keeping it loose. And again, we're going to come in with a couple more colors on top of that. So that will kind of loosen it up. I'll have some more outline with some of the darker colors. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. And then what I did in advance is I went ahead and had another painting so we could kind of keep on going. So acrylic dries very, very fast. It's best to be continuously blending when it's wet. Obviously, not obviously, but when you go to the next layer and you want to add in some detail, if you're not looking to blend, you have to let it dry. And so today we're live, yay! So no dry time here. So I went ahead and I had one set for us. So we'll go ahead and we're going to work on bringing in some of the definition. So I'm looking off to the side here because I have my original, which I showed you, and I'll just kind of remind you, this is what it looks like. So I'm bringing in some of the dark blues and the purples to bring in some of the depth and the shadows, keeping some of that focus to the right side and more of the light to the left side. And the bottom is really, it's so free. It's, it's supposed to look like, oh, he's in, some foliage or some grass or something, but or just kind of very loose and fun. So, all right. So to do that, you've got the choice of, which paintbrush do I work with? So as I mentioned, I've got my 3. I use, for this size canvas, I'm using majority of it in the middle brush. But for some of the highlights, I like to jump to the smaller filbert. And don't forget, it is a filbert. So I like this brush because it is rounded and the tip is rounded. And so you have less streaks in your painting. But then when you're working with it, you can also turn it to its side, get it nice and tight. And then with the edges, you can get in closer. But again, I also provided or always grab some tiny, tiny brushes. So don't feel free that you have to push the edge. If you're not comfortable with that size brush, jump to a smaller brush. And people ask me, like, what type of brush should I use, or what's the best brush? And the answer is the one that you feel the most comfortable with. So I see them in the store, and I know there's a technical reason behind why you use one versus the other. I grab the one I like, and I play with it. That's the one I use. So again, you'll find my my teachings are very, very loose. All right, so I'm grabbing some water. I'm dipping that. And I'm going to start with the blue, the dark blue, which I have not touched yet with any of the white. I'm going to go in here and just give some outline. And folks get a little afraid of going right to the canvas and being afraid to make those lines. So you'll notice that my lines are loose. I don't worry too much about getting them very tight because I know I can go over it and kind of change where I want everything to sit. If I don't like it, I can fix it. And especially blue and white. Blue and white is wonderful. It will cover a lot of oopsies. So just bringing in those highlights, or excuse me, the lowlights outline. And then I'm looking at my original so I can see exactly where my lines are at. And then we've got some nice tight lines under here, some shadows. A little bit here. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of outline here. All right. So I'm going to move into my dioxazine purple. And we're going to give us some more depth. And I'm kind of just giving us some fun. If you find that purple is becoming too translucent, grab some of your white, mix it in with your purple, and go over that. you will find there are so many different colors that have a tendency to be very translucent. So you'll have to go over them. You'll have to mix them with white and kind of go over them, or you just go right to white. So you'll, with acrylic, you're going to do a lot of layering. So you could start with white and purple to make a light purple. And then once that, I'll call it paste, when that first layer is on there, then you can come back with just purple and go over it, and it'll go a little darker. So as I'm doing that, we'll kind of go back to our discussion of consciousness and creativity, which is a great topic to kick off this YouTube because that's our focus here. We're combining the two, and we're asking those fun questions. So one of the other questions that come to mind is so we've kind of said consciousness is being aware when you're using your imagination to create an image in your mind. So do you have to be conscious to create? And I think any of us can say it's super hard to do that, to do some painting when you're unconscious. So the next question is, what happens to you when you create? And as you can see, painting requires some focused attention. And when I'm not talking, I'm very relaxed and I'm in the flow and things just come very naturally. By giving yourself that focused activity, there's a funny thing that kind of happens in your brain. You tend to block out all the chatter and all the noise. And then quite honestly, when do we ever get to think about one thing? I mean, that is an absolute luxury in itself. I have had the absolute joy and pleasure of teaching painting classes. I used to have a paint and sip studio in Clarkston, and what was so interesting is, folks always had a great time. I call it a 99% smile rate. So, but when they would start in that painting process, they always say, it's so relaxing. Like, why is that? Why is it so relaxing? So I went to Mr. Google, and, it turns out, there is something that happens in the brain. And with that, we block everything out. And again, you just get to think about one thing, and it gets you into this state of flow. You're present in the moment. You are thinking about just this painting, just this creation. And folks are just like, why is this so relaxing? And like I said, it's truly, I think it's a combination of being in the moment, being in the flow. You get there through that focused attention. And there are multiple things that's happening in your brain. So I won't quote Dr. Google again, or Mr. Google, but there are different parts of your right side. It is heavily right side. So there's visual and there's creation. So there's the front part of your brain, left, back part of your brain. But there's also proportion and organization. And I would venture to say that painting, while some say you're using heavily right side, I think you're using both sides of the brain. So you are in effect becoming balanced and centered. And with that balanced and centering and the relaxation and the focus, you create and you feel this sense of completion And quite honestly, isn't that consciousness? So you're present, you're aware, you're in the flow, and you're using your imagination. That is consciousness. So maybe we've potentially provided a theory that the answer is yes. I mean, you're the judge. That's up to you. Hopefully, I have given you enough thought to challenge maybe your current perception, or maybe to encourage you to take a little step closer to looking at things in a different way. Um, so we've done a lot of talking and a lot of painting. I'm not going to finish our painting here today, but I will finish it on the link that I have set down below. As well, if you are interested in purchasing one of the paintings, we'll send you a link for that too. If you like it, that's great. If you say, oh, I don't want to do it, I like yours. Sure. So, hopefully you'll discover this journey together is creative and fun, and you'll join us again. So don't forget to subscribe and follow along, and hopefully, through creation and consciousness, we'll spark a light. Thank you for joining us.